So let's start with kind of your childhood a little bit. Like, where were you born, and when you were growing up, what was the religion or spirituality like in your home, if you had any?
So I grew up in a little village in Yorkshire, the north of England. Um, my mother was religious, not overly so, but she prayed and she would go to church, and my dad was not. He was a really good man, but he didn't really pray or anything. He had served in India with the British Army and had some ideas about reincarnation. So we thought, to come back as a monkey or something. But he was a good man. He had all the Christian attributes. Um, he hadn't had any religion in his home growing up. He'd had to leave school when he was 12. His mother was an alcoholic, and I don't know if it was because of that he didn't really drink, and my mother didn't really drink either. They might have a glass of sherry at weddings and funerals, and that was about it. So my mother was born and raised in Sweden, and the state church of Sweden is a Lutheran church, which is quite a simple belief, really. So as I said, I grew up in a small village in North Yorkshire, and the religion in England is the Church of England, which is a Protestant religion. And so we would go to the church there in the village at Christmas and special occasions. We didn't really go on a regular basis at first until I joined the choir. They didn't care if you could sing or not, which is just as well. And we used to, the minister's 2 kids were in the choir too, so we just all used to goof around while he was talking because he mumbled and you couldn't hear what he was saying.
Nice.
So it was really bad, And the impression I had was that the women went there to see what the other women's hats were like. So it was just this big, cold, empty place that you just goofed around in, kind of. And when I went to my aunt and uncle's on vacation, they lived in a small village outside of York. And so again, it was a Church of England that we went to. My aunt played the organ, so I would sit beside her when I was little, and I remember wiggling around and my foot hitting the foot pedal during a prayer, and it just bellowed out and echoed throughout the church.
Oh my
So
goodness.
After that, she's Karin, sit still.
Now you can't move at all.
And then when I would go there on vacations when I was older, I joined the choir there too, just simply because it was kind of a fun thing to do. Then when I was about 12, 13, we moved, still in Yorkshire, but my father got a different job, and we moved to a town called Thornaby. And the following Christmas, my mother and I went up to the church there, and we're pretty shocked because the churches that we had been to, all Church of England, were fairly simple, no fuss, whatever. The ministers just wore a white surplice, and that was basically it, over the black cassock. But in this one, which was supposed to be Church of England too, they had all these robes and they were waving incense around, and we thought this was the same church.
Yeah.
And that was when we found out that there's a high church and a low church. So in the more rural areas in England, where they are poorer for the most part, the churches are simple, the ministers don't make as much money. But in the towns where there's more money, they're far more elaborate, and they're almost closer to the Catholic way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of, it's all supposed to be the same church, why is it so different?
Mm-hmm.
So my mother told me I didn't have to go back there. So, cool. And the minister had said to us, oh, hello, you live around here or whatever. And my mother said, yeah, I've been here about 10 months, And she made the comment that we had been there for 10 months and hadn't heard hide nor hair of them, nobody had come by or anything like that. So by this time I was going to school in Middlesbrough, and my best friend there, I told her what the church had been like that I went to, and she said, well, I go to the Methodist church. My mom's Methodist, so we could go there. So we went off to the Methodist church, to the youth club one night, and saw kids outside, and they were picking up cigarette butts, dog ends we call them, and smoking them. We thought, gross.
Yeah.
But they said, well, he does it, meaning the minister there, so why shouldn't we? He smokes. Why shouldn't we? We thought, okay. So we went, and both our fathers smoked, so it wasn't, it was that smoking for an adult wasn't a big deal, but the way the kids were doing it and the way they followed the example of the minister, made us think twice. So we went on into the youth club, and I don't know if we went there a couple of times, but then the minister left unexpectedly under not very good circumstances.
Okay.
So we decided, okay, we need to look around and find something different. So rather than going to churches, rather than judging churches on what people said about them, we decided we would go to the different churches and just see what they were like.
Yeah.
So we did, including the Catholic Church. We just went to visit on a Sunday or a church service or whatever. And none of them really felt right. Kind of once was enough. And then I took sick with rheumatic fever and was in bed for 3 months.
Oh my goodness.
And at first, my friend came to see me very regularly because she had to travel. She'd have to take 2 buses to get to where I was. We kind of spread out. Didn't have cars quite the way we do now. And I used to cycle a lot over there. Margaret didn't cycle. But then she wasn't coming as much. And she found this strange place that she was going to, this thing I'd never heard about before, like Mormons. And so she would come, and my mom would offer her tea. She'd bring us a cup of tea upstairs to me in my bed. And Margaret would say, no thanks, I don't drink tea now. So I would wave it under her nose. Okay. So it was through Margaret. We were both investigating different churches, but she was the one who actually found the church. And when I was able to come downstairs to eat dinner, she was with us one night, and there was a knock at the door. My mom went to answer it, and then she came back and sat down, and she said, there were these 2 young men. And so Margaret said, oh, they were probably Mormon missionaries. You should have invited them in. And Mom just looked at her,
Yeah.
So anyway, we didn't know, whatever. But as soon as I was allowed out, Margaret asked if she could take me into Middlesbrough. So my parents said, well, as long as you're careful and she doesn't overdo it, because the concern of the rheumatic fever is they don't get a weakened heart from it.
Oh.
And heart murmurs are heart problems. So I had to be really super careful. But anyway, so she took me to this place, which involved 2 buses and a long walk. Being really careful.
Yeah, really careful. Don't worry, we're just going across the street. No problem.
I know. And then it was, went down this street to a part of Middlesbrough that I hadn't been to before. Didn't look that great. They were like row houses, or I don't know if you call them townhouses or whatever. All the houses were together. And it led down to the dog track where they raised greyhounds and such, And every Thursday night, when some youth walked past, they would often kick in the door in the front, because this was where we were meeting, was in this house. You walk in and she said, mind the floorboards, because there were holes in the floorboards.
Oh my goodness. What is this place? Where have you taken me?
This is a church, you know. So I was quite surprised.
Yeah.
So we went on upstairs where they were having the meeting or whatever, and got to meet a few people, including the missionaries, of course, and started to have the discussions. And my father and I would sit down and try and figure out questions that would hopefully stump them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they wouldn't be able to answer them.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they did. And I'd go home and tell my dad. And I'd say, oh, okay, well, let's think about this, you know. And so that was my first exposure to the church. And I often say to people, it obviously was not the surroundings, the physical surroundings that attracted me to it.
Right.
It was the spirit that was there in spite of. You didn't really notice the surroundings, you know. You had to watch out, obviously, for holes. But it was the spirit that was there. And I had this image of my mom prayed all the time. Not all the time, but she would say her prayers. But we didn't have family prayer. And like I said, my dad wasn't religious. But I had this image in my head of Heavenly Father and Jesus as being these kindly white head with beards, you know, just almost grandfatherly type people. That's the image I had growing up. And that is one reason that I couldn't reconcile the teachings of many of the other churches, where they say that they're all one, because that that made absolutely no sense to me. They had to be distinct people, right? So, of course, in the discussions, that really spoke to me, in the spirit or whatever. And then the piano was interesting too, because as you played it, you had to pull the keys out so that they were ready to play for the next time around. If they were there, some of them were missing. So that's really my conversion story. Obviously we moved on from there to a working men's club on the other side of Middlesbrough. That was actually closer to Margaret, but further for me. So yes, we had to kind of open windows and air it out and throw certain things out before we started church there and everything.
So what kind of was the process for you as far as going from just having these discussions and meeting with these members and missionaries to deciding to become baptized, and how did that look in your family? Because you said your dad, you would have conversations with your dad. Was he supportive of you, or?
Obviously I had to have permission from him, because I was underage, so I'd have to have permission to get baptized. So I felt pretty much right away that it was right. And promptly slept with the baptismal consent form card under my pillow every night. And was kind of an unbaptized member. There were a few of us at that time. They called us dry Mormons.
Oh yes, yeah. I've heard that. Okay.
Yeah. So we would have callings because there was so few people.
Yeah.
You know, that
you're like, great, you're here. Please come do something.
Exactly. So, but my mother kind of stayed out of it. And they weren't, you know, I stopped drinking tea, obviously, you know, and didn't do any of the other stuff, so that didn't matter. So that part didn't worry them, you know. They weren't saying, oh, well, you should drink tea, why aren't you doing this? So they weren't anti. but neither would he sign a consent form. So we had to go to a different town for baptism, so we would all pile in the zone leader's van, breathe on the windows so the police couldn't see how many were actually packed into it, so that we could go to the baptisms, and see people get baptized, and then we'd all be, when are we going to get baptized, and kind of a little bit sad on the way home, but happy to. We used to sing a lot. We used to go to on rambles and hikes, the missionaries and the youth and whatever, and we just would be walking along in the middle of the field singing church songs, and it was very cool. Some people got baptized in the sea too at Red Calf, but that was really cool. But then it was probably about a year out from me being exposed to the church that I was just kneeling by my bed one night, and I was crying. I was upset and kind of saying, if this is true, it shouldn't be causing problems with my father and me. What's going on? Blah, 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 blah. Kind of ranting and raving a little bit and just upset. I don't remember the exact things, obviously, that I said. But it was like all of a sudden, through all that, this calm little voice came through and just said, and it sounds silly little nut, it's true, it's going to work out. Don't ask me where silly nut came from, because it's not an expression that we use, but it was just calm and through, and everything was just totally calm. So the next day after school, I used my pocket money and I went to go get my hair cut, and the guy looked at my hair. It was long and it was blonde, nice and blonde then. He says, no, that'd be a crime, I'm just going to trim it. I thought, so the next night I went to a different hairdresser. Said, I want my hair cut. So she cut it about to here, at a shoulder length. And she made the first cut. She said, you really shouldn't have it cut because it's really pretty. And I thought, why are you telling me that now after you've cut it? But anyway, she had it cut, and I came home. And my dad said to me, why did you have your hair cut? I said, so it'll dry faster on Saturday when I get baptized. And he just kind of looked at me. He said, oh, getting baptized on Saturday? Yes. And called the missionaries and was setting it all up, and everything was set up. Realized I had to get another baptismal consent form because mine had broken in half because it had been under my pillow for a year. So got that, and on the Friday night we were going up the stairs, and my dad said to me, I suppose you want me to sign that form? And I said, yes, please. It's all set up for tomorrow. He said, I'll do it on 3 conditions. 1, that it doesn't affect your schoolwork. 2, that it doesn't affect your piano playing. And 3, that you don't go knocking on doors. Well, it didn't affect my schoolwork. It actually helped my piano playing a little bit because I had to play. There was no one else to do it. And as for the other one, for knocking on doors, I'd already been standing on street corners because, the missionaries just put you up there and say, and now Sister Middlemore's going to talk to you. And I thought, I was well, what do I say? I stand on this little soapbox in the middle of town and I'm speaking. So for that one, it was, okay, whose is the greatest commandment? Heavenly Fathers or my earthly fathers? And I thought, if Heavenly Father wants me to do it, then I do it, And my father found out, a little while later that, yes, I would sometimes do missionary swaps with sister missionaries, and we'd go and do things, and he was fine with it. But that's how that happened. And as soon as I knew it was going to work because it was true, so it would work. And did all the preparation to actually get baptized. And then, of course, on the Saturday, the missionaries had picked me up to take me to the baptism. And by this time, my best friend was in bed with pleurisy.
Oh,
so
my
she
goodness.
couldn't go. But she wanted to see the form signed because her parents wouldn't let her get baptized if my parents didn't let me get baptized. So she wanted them to see it too. So the missionary leader, the zone leader, said, okay, here it is, you go straight up there, you come straight back down with it. You're not going to lose that form. I took it in and showed her and showed her parents. And of course, as soon as she was better, then she was able to get baptized too. And she became really sighted present, stably sighted present later. And she's